October 6th was a great day. Well, it was a great night, to be exact. I was with many of you. We were celebrating Simchat Torah. Young people, older people, and everyone in between. We danced arm in arm around the Torah, thanking God for giving us such a radiant and eternal treasure. October 6th was a great day, where we sang the words, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live, and we sang those words with joy and relaxation. And then came October 7th. And October 7th was the worst day, a day that will live in infamy for the Jewish people. October 7th is a day that will be mourned alongside the other tragic and terrible days of our history. A day when 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered in a bloody battle that in many cases was no battle at all. Where over 200 people were taken as hostages and around 100 remain in captivity until this very moment. It was a day that launched a brutal counterattack which resulted in the deaths of many thousands of civilians in Gaza. It was a day that unleashed unprecedented anti-Semitism in the United States. October 7th was a day that changed everything. On October 6th, we had many assumptions about the world. On October 7th, we realized many of them were wrong. The good news is, it's a good season to be wrong. It's a season of confession and repentance, where after admitting the error of our ways, we can move forward to a new year. And we, Jewish Americans, myself very much included, were wrong about 3 foundational beliefs. This morning, I want to share these ideas that perished the morning of October 7th and have changed the calculus of the Jewish people. So if you're wondering why you are still so disoriented, disturbed, troubled a year later, it's first and foremost because people were murdered on that awful day. Lives were lost, and that's the worst thing. But second, it's because fundamental ideas died that day as well. First, the state of Israel was never intended to stop anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is an irrational idea, so of course it cannot be stopped. But the state of Israel was intended to stop pogroms. One of the promises of being a sovereign state in the Promised Land was that Israel could stop this specific type of violence against the Jewish people. On October 6th, we knew pogroms were over. On October 7th, we wondered if they were back. October 7th was an attack on the Jewish state, but it was also an attack on the Jewish family. The family is the core organizing principle of us. Most ancient Near Eastern literature origin stories do not start with a shepherd and his wife, but ours does. Most accounts of ancient peoples are not about family drama, battling brothers, clever mothers, faithful fathers, but ours is. And that's what Hamas went for. Not a military target, not a weapons depot, not an infantry unit. They attacked a neighborhood on a holiday. That's the nature of a pogrom. Pogroms were violent groupthink attacks against Jewish civilians. They happened over the course of hundreds of years. Some were spontaneous, some were state-sponsored. They were murderous assaults where the dominant population rallied around the idea that Jews are the scourge of the earth in one way or another. In only 2 years' time, from 1918 to 1920, for example, tens of thousands of Jews were killed in Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. Most of us are here because those were the types of attacks our families fled. My great-grandmother hid under her kitchen table in her village in Russia as she heard the hooves of the militant Cossacks barreling down the mountains towards her village. Maybe yours did the same. Israel is designed to defend against that, to deter that, there and everywhere. To say once and for all, killing me because I am a Jew will no longer be tolerated. But seeing videos of girls carted away on motorcycles in the back seats of trucks screaming for their lives, seeing Jewish homes ransacked, changed that. On October 6th, we knew pogroms were over, written in a textbook, sealed in history as a sad artifact of our past. On October 7th, we can't say they are. And if Jews in Israel with an army can't stop that type of violence against themselves, it begs the question, can we? Are we prepared to? Or is the simple reality that such an event could happen here too awful to contemplate? Do we need to tell ourselves it's a farce, a scare tactic, that our friends are too civilized for that? I'm sorry, I've heard that one before. Israel, with all its flaws and blemishes, still represents the great hope of the Jewish people, the promised land. But for American Jews, in some ways, Israel represents our greatest fears about us. We are not like them, we tell ourselves. Our 18-year-olds go to college. Their 18-year-olds go to war. They pick up guns. We are horrified by guns. They tend to think of themselves in ways that are more ethnic or tribal, as part of a people. We tend to think of ourselves as people just the same as everyone else, but with a different religion. They are singled out, ostracized, boycotted, shamed, and we expect to blend in. They are part of an intractable conflict. We have been largely conflictless. But perhaps the biggest story we tell ourselves as diaspora Jews is that we are safe, and they are not. But this year I'm wondering, maybe we are more like they are than we think. On October 6th, we felt safe. On October 7th, we're not as sure. So if you feel shaky, it's because the world was shaken under you. If you feel like you're living in a historical moment you never wanted, it's because Jews can never outrun our destiny. If you feel like there was some kind of cosmic reset button pushed on October 7th, it's because it was. Maybe the past is not as far behind us as we'd like to think. On October 6th, we knew the period of pogroms was over. Now we have to consider the possibility that they are back. Second idea that perished on October 7th. In March, several brave souls from this synagogue got on a plane with me for our mission to Israel. I see many of you here this morning. And we went to the site of the Nova Festival massacre, where hundreds of young people were gunned down out for a night of dancing in the desert. And by the point we arrived, Israel had installed a makeshift memorial with images of young people who had been slain. We saw these pictures of young people just like our young people. Young women wearing cut-off jeans, all made up for a night out. Young men looking tan and smiling. All lives cruelly cut too short. And there at the site of the Nova Festival, we met with a man named Rami Davidai. He was a local farmer, and he told us his story. He explained the morning of the 7th, he received a call from a friend of his who said, "My kid is at these coordinates. There's something going on. Go get him." Rami's wife had made him his morning coffee, and he said to her, "Leave my coffee on the counter. I'll be back in a minute." So Rami left in his little white car without a weapon and without knowledge of the massacre that was underway. And he began to see strange things. An abandoned motorcycle on the side of the road, cars with men with weapons that didn't quite look like the IDF, but also sort of did look like the IDF. And he found his friend's child, brought him back to his own home, and the child did what young people do. He posted on social media. The post read something like, terrorist attack at the Nova Festival. To save your child, call Rami Davidi. And he listed Rami's phone number. Well, hundreds of parents began writing to Rami with their child's coordinates. He received thousands and thousands of messages. And Rami, with his farmer's knowledge of the countryside, his fluent Arabic, the help of his extended family, sheer luck, and perhaps the guiding hand of God itself, ended up saving over 700 young people that day. When he got home for good, 3 days later, he asked his wife for that cup of coffee. And on his travels that day, he came upon the Nova site and saw the massacre. Bodies of young, murdered people were everywhere, he told us. And he saw women stripped naked, blood still dripping, tied to trees. Rami cut them loose, untied them, closed their eyes, said the Shema, and went on to try and save some of the living. Rami witnessed the aftermath of the sexual violence against these women. He prayed for them and tried to restore their dignity. And so should we. So should the rest of the world. It's the obvious human thing to do. But rather, much of the world responded with silence. And that, for me, was the second idea that died that day. The assumption that Jews would receive equal treatment from mainstream society evaporated. UN Women waited 2 months to tweet about the rapes, and even then it was merely a perfunctory statement. Prominent feminist groups and human rights groups said virtually nothing. An elected American congressman denied that these assaults happened at all, and another simply said that rape happens as a part of war. Prominent women in our country who had spoken out for others couldn't even spare Israeli women an Instagram post. There's still time. Newspapers that seemed very quick to post damaging headlines with alarmingly few facts took a notably long time to publish what to any decent person was irrefutable. On October 6th, we knew rape was unacceptable in any circumstance. We knew that sexual violence against women as a tool of war was a worldwide red line held by all decent people. On October 6th, we knew that Jewish women would be treated as equal to other women in the same horrible situation. But after October 7th, we didn't. And I am so angry about it. There is a division on so many issues about this war. Fury at Hamas for perpetrating a massacre, anger at the Israeli government for not procuring a hostage deal and for the number of Palestinian civilian casualties. There's criticisms of the American government's policies, and there's anger at God, to name just a few of the issues. But on this issue, the issue of using this type of violence as a tool of war, I fail to see the other option except to condemn it as wrong. The othering of Jewish women by human rights groups is emblematic of a pattern of behavior happening much more broadly. One where Jews are being pushed out of the mainstream. From college campuses to LGBTQ plus spaces, to authors, to journalists, to K through 12 schools, to online moms groups, Jews are being made to feel less than, diminished, uncomfortable, unheard, and unwanted by some. And it's horribly, wildly painful. On October 6th, we assumed Jews were part of mainstream institutions, of society and culture. It was so obvious. On October 7th, the philosophical attack against American Jews was unleashed, and now we're not so sure. Since October 7th, There hasn't been a day, maybe there hasn't even been a moment, where I haven't thought about October 7th. And so what was that dreadful day? I think it was a reversion, a regression, a reset of Jewish existence. Not a flash forward, but a flash back to a time where Jews were unsafe, ostracized others. It was a triggering, transformative, generational trauma that reverted us to the historical realities of what it has meant to be a Jew. It was the decisive end to the incredible vacation from anti-Semitism that we've enjoyed for the past few decades. It's maddening, it's unfair, it's unjust, and it's here. But before we bury our heads in the sand and give up out of sheer frustration, there's one more pre-October 6th assumption that we were wrong about. Or at least I was very wrong about this one. On October 6th, without realizing it, I thought of us, American Jews, myself included, as a little weak. Our biggest problems as a Jewish community was how to stay Jewish, basically because things were going so well here. Not only did we have access to every cultural and secular institution, we built them. We were a part of them. We ran them in some cases. So much about being Jewish in America was fantastic and even easy. And perhaps I'm overstating it to some extent, but I think the assumption in my mind was that we were not fighting a neighboring terrorist organization. We were fighting soccer practice on Sundays. But I was wrong about us. Because October 7th set me straight about American Jews. We are not weak. Rather, we are strong, smart, and dedicated to living as Jews. On October 6th, I thought of contemporary Jewish heroism as mostly for Israelis. On October 7th, I learned that bravery and boldness is also a part of us. Everywhere I look, I see Jews, our family members who are both Jewish and non-Jewish, standing up for the Jewish people. College kids who are fed up and demand equal access to education and equal treatment at their schools. Professionals who insist on being included in inclusive spaces. Jews at rallies, Jews wearing necklaces, Jews wearing kippot that otherwise wouldn't. I see Jews who want to be seen and who refuse to be diminished and ignored and pushed to the side. I see Jewish women who are organizing ferociously on behalf of their children and Jewish men who are dedicating themselves to the Jewish family now more than ever before. I see a return to synagogue, to study, to spirituality. And another thing, on October 6th, I always thought of Israel as fighting for us, for our behalf. But now I see that we are also fighting for them. And we're doing incredibly well against a very difficult backdrop. On October 6th, I thought of us as a little frail. But on October 7th, I know that the power of the American Jew is rising. I know we are getting stronger, more organized, and more clear by the moment, and that we don't need to be intimidated or surprised anymore because we recognize what's happening. And we are actually quite tough, and we have all the tools to fight back. We have our incredible community where we listen and lift each other up. We have Jewish wisdom at our sides. We can grapple with who we are and who we want to be. We have the strength of our ancestors who fought and survived and stayed with the Jewish people, just as we will. And while we were in Israel back in March, we met with journalists and politicians, military experts, survivors, everyday Israelis. Every moment was illuminating and challenging and heartbreaking. But you know the most important thing that we did there? We did a bat mitzvah. A 13-year-old girl stood in front of the Sefer Torah and chanted the ancient words of our tradition. When things are horrible and when things are wonderful, doing a Jewish thing is the right answer. It is not trivial or avoidant. Rather, it is the key to it all, to knowing who we are, where we are going, and even how to get there. In some ways, it's never been a better time to be a diaspora Jew, because we know what we are fighting for, which is this: the simple and elegant freedom to be Jewish. We may never return to that October 6th universe of comfort, relaxation, and maybe even some wonderful naivete, but we, as American Jews, won't be stopped. Instead, we will dance again, and we will sing Am Yisrael Chai once again this year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, and every year for eternity. I hope you'll join me. Shana Tova.